Hey, good morning all. The sun is shining today, so we're all happy. I want to remind everybody who's present to please just switch off your camera and videos. Make sure you're on mute. And an opportunity will be given at the end of each presentation for questions to be asked. You can just click on your hand, raise your hand, and then remember when you're done to lower your hand. And then also questions and comments can be locked on chat. The competition rules to be adhered to very strictly, and Aspasa is very proud of that. Before I hand over to Letitia, our chairperson, I just want to say thank you to all the presenters that's here today presenting for us on this very important topic. And I also want to personally thank Letitia very much for her effort she's been putting into this workshop. Thank you, Letitia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anneke. And also, if I can ask for the presenters just to show your face before you present, and all the other participants to switch off their cameras. So this is our second, am I right, Anneke? Our second Aspasa, or third one, gender
Third
justice.
one, yeah.
Third one. And the need for small-scale mining is immense. There's a lot of willingness, but sometimes just not an understanding of where does the women in mining structures come from and how to fit it into their current workplaces. So we hope today it gives you a bit more clarity, because we've got very, very interesting guest speakers today. For the first one being Thabo Makafane, which is the WIMAC program manager. I will let him introduce himself, and welcome to our third Women in Mining for Small Scale Mines session. Thank you, Thabo.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Letitia, and thanks for the invitation. So as you've mentioned, I'm Thabo Makafane. I work for the Mine Health and Safety Council, and I'm the CTEC and WIMAC program manager. Both committees are some of their work are sort of interrelated to each other. They deal, quite frankly, with the softer issues, but also we feed in a lot of our work into Center of Excellence, which is part and parcel of CIMREC. So thank you. And without wasting any time, I think I will jump into my presentation. Can we all see the presentation?
Yes, thank you. We can see it.
Thank you very much, Anneke. Please stop me at any time of the presentation if it's not clear or the audio is not clear. I might be having some network issues based on the quality and the feed while I'm presenting. But feel free to stop me and to repeat myself if I wasn't clear. Thank you very much. So just to give you a little bit of background, WIMAC, it's a Women in Mining Advisory Committee, which is formed in 2020. But a lot of the work that WIMAC has been dealing with or has started to develop has been there in the past, and they've been sitting under the advisory committee called Cultural Transformation Advisory Committee. And Women in Mining has always been there, and since the establishment of CTEC, but they have been sitting under CTEC as a steering committee, as basically a technical steering committee to drive some of the initiative around WIMAC. But in 2019, following the Women in Mining in Durban, it was then the resolution was taken that WIMAC should stand alone as its own Women in Mining Advisory Committee. And purely to actually elevate the women in mining issues, straight to council, and so that it has a much broader scope as well to cover all angles and all issues relating to women in mining. So with The content that I'll be just covering for my presentation, I'll be looking at the MHSC mandate and role, just to remind ourselves what the role of Mine Health and Safety Council is. I'll just touch a bit on where the journey started, since I've already alluded to the establishment of Women in Mining and advisory committee itself, a little bit on the research outcomes, and also what is our mandate and role as WMEC. And then I'll just touch on some of the key strategic milestones for this current financial year, and also just some areas of collaborations which emanated from the Women in Mining Indaba resolution or actions that came from there. Just to give a bit of high level background, Mine Health and Safety Council is established in terms of the Act 929 of 1996. And the main objective there is to actually try and advise the minister on all occupational health and safety issues in the mining industry, and also to develop some research that will be able to assist council in achieving and striving towards zero harm. But also, most importantly, is also to review some of the current legislation, the Mine Health and Safety Act and its amendment, and to make recommendations to the minister as well. But most importantly as well, again, is to promote a health and safety culture in the industry, broadly in the South African mining industry, and to oversee some of the research in relation to health and safety in the mining industry. As you would know that, with the mandate for council, we would also have strategic partners and we'll partner with employers, employees, and all that. So we need to also try to oversee some of the research in that space as well, so that it's also in line with the Act, and also that any current development or changes in the industry, we are able to then draft policies and regulations to actually facilitate the adoption of those technologies and other initiatives in the industry. But we do this in the spirit of tripartism, and that is organized labor, state, and employers coming together, joining hands, and say, how do we then achieve a culture of zero harm in our industry? So if you look at the structure of council, council has close to 8 advisory committees, and the 2 new advisory committees that's been added is WMEC and MOSEC. So those are the 2 added advisory committees in the past recent years. But in essence, what happens is that all the research that we do, that we would recommend, or any of our programs, we would do it through CEMREC, Center of Excellence, which will ensure the effective delivery of our programs and research, but also with WMEC trying to provide that kind of oversight as well into some of the projects, and to make sure that we deliver sort of a meaningful research outcomes and research in the industry, but also that is supported by the office itself to ensure that the operations and the implementation and monitoring of all these programs are all aligned with the PFMA, and they have resources allocated, and that we are able to deliver, legislation, regulations, be it guidelines, some instances, health and safety policies, HIV, AIDS, and TB programs, and also, providing some oversight onto the cultural transformation framework as well. So in essence, this is the structure of council. Is a fairly flat structure. It's a fairly flat structure, and these are the advisory committees, and members should feel free to go onto a website. They will be able to access, the objectives, or just a bit of high level what CEMREC stands for, what are their mandate, what are their roles. But today specifically, I'll be touching on WMEC, Women in Mining Advisory Committee. So if you look at our journey, Women in Mining journey, it all started in 2008. With a simple project called, I call it simple, but, it touched on a lot of, real issues around, behavior change and mindset change. And in 2008, the industry with its stakeholders got together and said, look, we need to change the behaviors in the industry. A lot of our research has been centered around the hard, the tangible stuff, but we need to change our mindset. And how do we do that? And then the project called Changing Minds and Changing Minds was then commissioned. in 2008. And following that, one of the recommendations that came from the report as well gave rise to the establishment of what we call the culture transformation framework, which has got 11 pillars of the key strategic pillars that the industry wanted to drive, and so that we are able to then drive and change behavior into the future. And that gave rise in 2012 to the establishment of Culture Transformation Advisory Committee to actually oversee this culture transformation framework. And I must mention, within the culture transformation framework, there's a pillar around elimination of discrimination against race, gender, and it calls for, you know, a diversified and inclusive work environment. And within that pillar, CTEC then established a task team, which was called the Women in Mining Steering Committee, to oversee, you know, gender issues around that pillar. And that gave rise to the establishment of what we called back then, around 2012, the Women in Mining Steering Committee. And then subsequent to that, initiatives were commissioned to address the cultural transformation pillars, especially the very first 6 pillars, which were prioritized to be fully implemented in 2020. So we have already passed that. So there's 6 other remaining pillars, which are also due for implementation by 2020. So those initiatives, there was initiatives and programs put in place, and the cultural transformation guideline was also put in place to actually make sure that this culture transformation framework is sort of rolled out into the South African mining industry. And then in 2019, then the Women in Mining, Occupational Health and Safety Indaba was held, and that gave rise to a number of issues, which I'll touch on. And later in my presentation, it gave rise to a number of issues that needed to be addressed. And one of the key resolution taken at that Indaba was that the establishment of WIMEC as a standalone advisory committee, so that they can have a voice and they can have a broader scope. And it was the idea that it must be fully capacitated to ensure that women in mining challenges and issues in the industry are well addressed. And that gave rise and gave the voice into council, and also the direct access to advise the minister as a Women in Mining Advisory Committee. Just some of the related initiatives that was developed aimed at, you know, addressing women in mining issues. We saw a PPE for women in mining research conducted, and that gave rise to the PPE guideline as well, and a number of other issues around PPE. We saw issues around safety and security of women, challenges facing women in the South African mining industry, where you know, sexual harassment issues become an issue, gender-based violence, working in deserted areas, those kind of stuff. How do we ensure the safety and security of women in the South African mining industry? And we saw that the development of a sexual harassment guidance, guideline and policy for women in mining. And then later on, we saw again the development of elements that will aim to address racism, genderism, and all forms of unfair discrimination in the South African mining industry. And that research also gave rise to a framework of elements that can be adopted by organizations or by the industry in addressing issues of racism, genderism, and unfair discrimination. And then also, what happened later in the year, we saw again the assessment of the economic design of self-contained rescue devices for women. We saw that some of the rescue devices were sort of quite heavy and not ideal and conducive for the anthropology of women in mining. So again, they did an assessment which gave rise to certain areas that needed to be improved in order to ensure that the self-contained rescue devices are ideal and portable for women in mining. If you look at our mandates as Women in Mining Advisory Committee, the main objective here is to provide advice and evidence based on women in mining issues in the industry, especially to the minister and also to the industry as well, but also to focus on areas of occupational health and safety for women in mining in the sector, and to recommend programs for CIMREC, as I've mentioned earlier, that Center of Excellence are the key driver of ensuring that our research program gets implemented efficiently and effectively, so that we deliver it, in time for the industry and in a meaningful way as well. So the main idea is to identify occupational health and safety programs and research, and a lot of this research, should emanate from structures like this, where we see women in mining, regional women in mining forums, where they've got a certain concern within a region or as an industry, and then we will then elevate those research needs into our programs, and then we will then advise a center of excellence on which projects to execute and all that. And also to advise council regarding the communication and publication of occupational health and safety related issues for women in mining. So mainly here it's around the dissemination of some of the research outcomes and the publication of research that's aimed at, alleviating women in mining issues in the industry. But what are our duties as WIMEC? And then mainly the primary objective is to advise council, which will then advise the minister in writing on the relevant research in the mining industry. And we need to review our health and safety performance in the different sectors. In the different mining sectors, or call it the different various commodities and a different class of mines. We've got small, medium, and large organizations, so we need to be able to pull out data and be able to analyze the data as well. And then we need to develop women in mines occupational safety research focus. So as I've mentioned earlier, any pressing issues, any challenges that we need to do research on can be elevated to WIMEC, and WIMEC will put it into their program so that we are able to then respond to some of the challenges through research. And then thirdly, we recommend in this program of work that needs to be undertaken to council as well, because we need to advise council so that council is able to provide the resources and the capacity to conduct some of this research, and also to make sure it's in line with the objectives of the Mine Health and Safety Act, and mainly just to also achieve a health and safety culture that is aimed at having zero harm. And then number 4 is basically identify some of the strategic risks that the committee may face and manage, and we need to manage this accordingly, and formally report on how this was done to council as well. So our objective is to have that strategic view, to see some of the strategic issues that we need to try and resolve as WIMEC, and we do that in the spirit of organized labor, state, and employers, and this is achieved through the tripartism. So WIMEC in its composition, is represented by 5 organized labor members and 5 employers, and also including 5 members from state as well. Just some of the key milestones for WIMEC for this financial year. And a lot of the milestone as well, it's a sort of like a multi-year program as well, but we've already started with the first milestone, where we looked at the current PPE for women, where it needed to be reviewed because it's been in the industry and it was due for review. We've amended we've reviewed the PPE guideline. We've held our stakeholder engagement workshop last year. So currently the PPE guideline is sitting with AMREC, LDC, which they're tying up a few other things to make sure that it's in line with the Mine Health and Safety Act, and that it is within reasonable measures as well, that it's not seen as being onerous and unfair as well. Then the second part is the GBVF guideline and its audit tool. So WIMEC has developed and drafted the guideline. We've also held our workshop. So again, this draft guideline document is within AMREC, LDC, who's checking the legalities and making sure that it's developed. It's in line with the Mine Health and Safety Act. We then look at the GRP, BMEA, which I think Ms. Magdalene Mukwena from the DMR will touch on this. But this GRP BMEA guideline, which is called the Gender Response Planning, Budgeting, Monitoring, and Audit Framework, which is a national government strategy. The main focus here is to address issues of gender equality. And the essence of it is to say, what are the women in mining challenges from an equality point of view? How can we put a plan in place? How do we resource it? How do we monitor it? And how do we evaluate it so that we address issues of gender equality? But not necessarily women in mining. So we do understand there's also LGBTQ a community as well that also needs to be accommodated in our industry. So this GRP BMEA guideline is already drafted. So we're just finalizing it as WMEC. When we finalize the draft, we will then have a stakeholder engagement workshop, which the dates will be confirmed when that will take place, and members in this platform as well will be invited to join the workshop so that they can be able to go through the document, analyze it, give input so that we are able to draft it and then take it to council, to MREC to then finalize it, and then it becomes a document that we will have to then conform to in line within the ambits of the Mine Health and Safety Act. And then fourthly, what we do, which is a continuous thing, we need to continuously assess and conduct occupational health and safety women-related research. So we've looked at the current existing research, and we looked at the recommendations, and then we looked at how can we further improve this research. And then secondly to that, we looked at the occupational health and safety Indaba action plans, which had also other research commitments. And we looked at how we can then be able to fast track and put that into our programs, and how we can address some of those actions into the existing PPE guideline and the GBVF guideline, the GRP guideline, because a lot of the issues that emanated from the Indaba are then addressed in some of that. There are a few which we haven't started, but it's a progress. It's a work in progress. We're working towards achieving those. And then number 5 is we need to, which I've touched on, which is the coordination of the 2019 OHS Indaba Action Plan. So there's a lot of, within the Indaba Action Plan as well, there's a lot of roles and responsibilities employers have to play, government has to play, and organized labor has to play. So we're trying to coordinate the implementation of that because of the fact that it's a joint responsibility amongst the various stakeholders. And then the last thing is that we're hoping, and we're crossing thumbs there, we need to host the 2022 Occupational Health and Safety Women in Mining Indaba, which will happen in this financial year as well. So these are the, in broader terms, the 6 key strategic initiatives or milestones for women in mining that we aim to achieve. So the first, which is the PP guideline, the GBVF and the GRP, we're hoping that by end of this financial year, at least they should be promulgated out in the industry, and they should be adopted, and the changes to the current code of practices and the development of new code of practices will then take place. But we've also seen that some players, some organizations have already taken the initiative even further, where they already started implementing some of the recommendations or the requirements within the guideline itself, so that they are already, taking a proactive measure to make sure that it's implemented even way before it's been even promulgated. Some areas of collaboration. This is the areas programs which were adopted from the Occupational Health and Safety Indaba in 2019, where there is a program. There's a series of programs which are grouped together into what council and WMEC have to do. And some of them were also aimed at reproductive health, and others were related to personal protective equipment. So if you look at the MHSC and WMEC intervention, again, what's still outstanding there is that we need to hold Women in Mining annual campaigns, and we're hoping that with the 2022 Women in Mining Indaba, we'll be able to facilitate awareness and create the level of interaction that is needed to ensure that these programs and these initiatives are achieved through the Indaba, and also that we also get feedback on other issues that we need to address as we make as well. And then secondly, the creation of a dashboard and Women in Mining app, it's still something that we still have to develop, especially around issues of occupational health and safety data around women in mining in the industry. We need to develop a platform where we can share information, where that information is readily available, but also importantly, that information needs to feed back into our programs so that whatever decisions we take, it's evidence-based on the data itself and all of that. And then the other thing is, which is also important, is the reproductive health. There's a number of research that we're looking at within Center of Excellence around the impact of reproductive of mining on reproductive health of women, and also how dealing with measures to deal with pregnancy and also lactating and unborn children. What are those hazards and what are those occupational issues? But also what we're trying to encourage when we look at the issues of reproductive health is to ensure that there's inclusion of pregnancy tests during medical surveillance as well, so that mothers are able to to detect whether they're pregnant in time, so that measures can be taken in time to prevent any occupational health and safety hazards. Personal protective equipment for women. We've looked at the issues around establishment of structures within the organization on addressing PPE issues and the quality of PPE, and also most importantly, which we try to address with this one, is we classify it as undergarments, but the right terminology is the garments between undergarments and the protective equipment. And the reason for that is there's certain risk associated with PPE, interacting with the human skin in such a way that sometimes it creates rashes, and there's other things. So there's that call for undergarments as well, and also to take in consideration the extreme weather conditions as well. Some areas it's very cold, some areas it's quite hot. How do we assist the industry into ensuring that there is some intermediate garments between the actual undergarments and the PPE itself. So those are some of the developments or the changes in the current PPE guideline that we will see in the new reviewed or developed guideline as well. Further areas is around the women in mining structure. We've talked about WIMEC. We saw WIMEC following this 2019 Indaba. They've requested that there should be a WIMEC advisory committee or women advisory committee being established, and it must be supported. And the aim there again is to break silos across all stakeholders, and to also bridge the gap between the women in mining structures from a regional level, from a regional women in mining forum, and also to interact with WIMEC. So on quarterly basis, the chairpersons at the various regions would interact with WIMEC so that they are able to provide feedback on their 5-year strategic plans, what challenges they are faced with, and also to gain further information of what WIMEC is doing and what programs they have in place and how they can best assist each other throughout the various various regions as well. They are close to over 10 regions, so that platform allows regional WIM chairperson to interact with other regions and also to share some of the best practices and also some of the challenges as well. Then the other part, which is sexual harassment. Sexual harassment has been an issue, and we try to address this issue, the issues of sexual harassment in the GBVF guideline, which will come. So you will recognize that it's called gender-based violence and femicide, also including safety and security of women, which again, it addresses issues of sexual harassment. In that, it calls for body systems, ambassadors, establishing of women in mining structure, and also looking at within a specific regions, there are support structures that will be able to support mines and organizations, especially the victims of gender-based violence, on how to deal with that. So we need to draw a lot of the support from the existing surroundings and even services and even support groups in order to address issues of sexual harassment in the GBVF. Because one of the biggest problem is when there's victims of sexual harassment in GBVF, how do they get assisted and where do they get support, where can we leverage, professional help and all that. So it is encouraged within the GBVF guideline that there should be, a collaboration within organizations or structures within the community, actually to support minds and to draw support from there, other than just, trying to establish new structures and all that. And also to tap into existing government structures like the confidential hotline, where sexual harassment and GBVF can be reported as well. And then lastly, which is very important, is around wellness. It's important that within our training programs that there is financial, mental wellness programs, especially for women in mining, to be able to address some of the challenges that they face and all that. Because a lot of the time when you find victims of GBVF and sexual harassment, just to give an example, they at sometimes the financial well-being gets threatened, and also their mental wellness gets also threatened. So within the programs that we have, within the mines and especially wellness programs, we should also emphasize on women in mining wellness programs that will support women, especially from a financial, mental well-being as well. And also given other dynamics as well that might be taking place. But in general, wellness program needs to be also encompass other things over and above health assessments and all the other wellness programs, awareness. So just some of the key strategic workshops or events that I've mentioned. The GRPBM guideline, as I've mentioned, it's still in draft form. We're going to finalize it. Once WIMEC says the draft, they're happy with it, we then engage stakeholders on the draft document, and members will be invited to either a virtual workshop where we will be able to engage on the document and make recommendations on some of the changes on the document. So the dates will be confirmed. And then the other, we're hoping to host again the 2022 Women in Mining Indaba this year as well, and also the dates will be confirmed as well. But we're hoping that maybe in August, thereabout, we should have the Women in Mining Indaba as well. So in a nutshell, that's all from my side. And I think the main objective, what we try to strive for, is to ensure that everyone returns from work unharmed every day and across all spectrums of gender and operations and all that. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you, Tabu. That was absolutely phenomenal. Ladies and gentlemen, can you see how much work has been put in place since 2008 for women in mining? And before I go over to the next speaker, please utilize the Mine Health and Safety Council at your site-specific events and share your site-specific events with Aspasa Gender Justice and also with the council, because we can all learn from each other. Tabu, I just want to see, is there any questions for Tabu before we move on to the next guest speaker? He is the WIMAC program manager and CTAC, and I see there's a few ladies. Yes, Yanga.
Thank you, Letitia. Tabo, just on the aspect where you said you're looking at including pregnancy tests for the medical exams, I just wanted 2 questions there. Are you looking at making it mandatory, or will the person be given an option not to do it? And as well, if when you look at pregnancy, it's today you can go test and you not be pregnant, tomorrow you can be pregnant. Are you looking at including it in the annual medical for the 1-year period, or are you going to be doing it on a 3 months basis, or what? I'm not sure. I'm just trying to figure it out, all that. How is it going to be done? Thank you, Letitia.
Thanks, Yanga. Tabu, are you going to respond?
Yes, thank you for that. What we're doing currently, is still under the debates, and I think with WIMEC, what we tend to do is there's another advisory committee called MOHEC and METHEC, which deals around health issues and all that. So we will then be able to table this, and they will then be able to provide a guidance to the industry on when and the periodic, because it requires inputs from your occupational doctors and all that to be able to give guidance to say, how do we then approach issues? But also what's important is that there's a very important study with Center of Excellence where we need to understand the impact of mining activities on pregnant women, which will then inform the guidance notes and the guidelines to say, how do we then test this? But in the moment, what we're saying is, let's create awareness to say, mines, please allow pregnancy tests to be available at all times, and create awareness in your organization so that women feel free to come and test and to check whether they're pregnant. Because one other thing as well, we've seen it, or one of the comments that came through, with around these issues of pregnancy tests, is that sometimes women get discriminated for the fact that they are pregnant. So in the meantime, while research is taking place, because research does take a bit of time, and also while we're engaging with other advisory committees, with experts to say, how do we deal with this issue? We need to encourage, pregnancy test, that it needs to be free, and it needs to be, free for all, so that it's not discriminatory to all employees as well.
Thanks, Thabo. Just before I give to Nariadi, Yanga, remember there's a fitness code of practice on the mine as well. And in that, they normally ask the ladies if they are aware, if they are pregnant. And we also try and encourage ladies to come forward to report if they are pregnant, so that we can manage the risk. So that is the pregnancy test being available is only a draft recommendation. It is not currently a gazetted guideline or COP yet, but it's good practice. Okay, so in your respective companies, you can see how you can implement something like that. Nariadi?
Letitia, on that one, most of the underground mines, it's already been practiced when we do our annual medical. So because we cannot allow females to work underground, for example, when they are pregnant. So for the company to also be on the safe side, every time we go for medical, it's a must that everyone must do a pregnancy test.
Yeah, and remember, underground risks are much higher than surface because of the methane gas, the temperatures, and access to medical attention. So it is very different than surface mines. Okay, thank you very much, Thabo. Is there any other questions before we continue with the program? Going once, twice, 3 times? No one, thank you. Thanks a lot, Thabo. And just linking to what Thabo has just said, yesterday I had a phone call from a mine, a bit worried that how are they going to do these structures? And because the constitution of women in mining is quite comprehensive, and it is very much large-scale mine written, if you look at it, because the Limpopo women in mining sent through who should be on your committee, and small-scale mines don't get put off by that constitution, because the regional women in mining structures are there, like Limpopo, Gauteng, and the next speaker, and that's why I want to talk about it before Nariadi takes over. So you will fall, like in Limpopo, under your Limpopo regional structure, which then feeds into Thabo's department. So Limpopo will say, this is my challenges, this is our 5-year plan, and we give feedback about 3 to 4 times a year on that, sometimes even more if there's something pertinent. But then the operation itself, like a Marble Hall or a Olifantsfontein or a Raubex, must make a platform on the small-scale mine for women to come forward. So when we started our gender-based violence and our sexual harassment guideline, the one man actually told me, this is brilliant, Letitia, but the women are not going to come forward because there's nowhere for them to go if they follow this policy or procedure. So at your mine, no matter how small you are, there must be an existing platform that you can tap into. We've got SHE committee meetings, we've got future forums, and we've got EE forums already with tripartism in them. Don't go and create something outside of what you already have. Just add the 5-year plan and the topics in there and have awareness programs around that as you receive the information from WIMAC. So it's not additional work or additional, okay, it is a little bit additional work, sorry. If you're on these committees, you do work because you must put the program together, but you get the information directly from WIMAC. So don't start something all from scratch. Mine Health and Safety Council is there to help. The Aspasa Gender Justice Platform is there to help. And the other regional platforms are there to help. Okay, so please don't let the Constitution put you off of starting something. Yes, Tabu.
Yes, and I just wanted to add, I wanted to add on that, especially when you talk about the women in mining structures. You will see even with the PPE, the GBVF and the GRP guideline, it calls for women in mining structures to be in place. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We'll have to combine all of them. And within the agenda, have an agenda for PPE for women in mining, GBVF, and all the other issues, which will then address the issues, stipulated in the guideline itself, and also other issues within. And also, if you look at the Women in Mining Constitution for the Regional Women in Mining Constitution, the reason why we wrote it comprehensively, it's merely a guideline. And we even stipulate in the Constitution that it can be adopted as is, or organizations, or even at the tripartite level, they can reinvent or develop their very own constitution as well. So it is not cast in stone, but we do allow that each and every region be able to establish its constitution based on its dynamics and its uniqueness within the region, so that they are able to achieve its mandate. Thank you very much.
Any questions on the structures per operation before I hand over to the Gauteng Women in Mining Chairperson, Nariedi Segwe? Okay, and Nariedi, just give me a moment. I'm going to switch off my camera. You can switch on your camera and just introduce yourself while I'm finding the presentation here for you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Nariedi Segwe, Chairperson for Women in Mining in Gauteng. Thank you.
I just want to check, can everybody see the presentation?
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Nariedi. Over to you.
Thank you, Letitia. I tried to make it very short, and I'll try to speak fast so that I don't take much of your time. As I've already introduced myself, we can go to the next slide. On the next slide, the pictures that you see there are the committee, some of the committee members from our region, which is Ukosi and Merafong RTF, and I am just a messenger. And just wanted to remind everyone, or just share with everyone, what our goals are as Gauteng Women in Mining, which is issues that are related to occupational health, safety, and security of women in the mines. It's something that we number one priority that we wanted to be clearly discussed across. And also transformation of mining practices in support of gender equality and women's empowerment. Development programs through knowledge, innovation, results-based management, and evaluation. These goals that I just mentioned, we clearly see them from the Ukosi RTF, the pictures that Letitia mostly share with us. That is where we get to see the transformation, we get to see most of this being implemented. And yeah. And our mission is just to continuously strive to encourage participation of all stakeholders, to motivate women on occupational health and safety, whilst ensuring allocation of adequate resources for women empowerment, job preservation, and gender equality, to facilitate equal opportunities in all roles within the mining environment. So that is what our mission is as Gauteng Women in Mining. What we plan to do, because that is my topic for today, is the events for 2022. So for August, which is the Women's Month, when we celebrate the Women's Month, we wanted to also look at the teenage pregnancy and also addressing the boy child as well. For mothers that are working in the mines, some of us, we leave our children back at home. We come to work here with our grannies. And when we get home and then the kids take advantage or certain things happen. So we wanted to make an awareness about the teenage pregnancy and address that abroad. And also looking, some of our women in mining have been affected by this or is still affecting them. Those of us that are working shifts, where we don't get to be with our girl children at night, and when we are on certain shifts, and then they tend to do certain things, and yeah, so the issues around that, and so that we can just make an awareness and acknowledgement, and yeah, and also take a girl child to work. It's something that we wanted to focus on and look at. But on this one, we will be looking at encouraging the mines to cooperate with the SLPs, Women in Mining, together with the SLPs around the local schools, whereby we find that young girls tend to go to varsity and then study certain things, and when they get there, then they realize, but no, this is not for me. So we want to encourage that when we have this, then it will actually give a basic of what they will be intending to do, but also to appreciate what their mothers are doing at the mines. And on the mental health and energy, since 2020, when we had COVID, the numbers have been very high on that, and we have suffered a lot of mental health due to the loved ones that we have lost, the issues that the jobs that have been lost. Some of us are working, our husbands are working. There's just so many things that happened, and also what we also observed with that was our loved ones who during that period when we could not go anywhere tend to forget that they have to go take their medication, especially those that were on chronic, and when they had COVID, we have lost them. So that one is a topic that is close to everyone's heart, and we will be focusing on that and making an awareness on it. Then the other one is in October, to give an awareness about the breast and cervical cancer. And on this one, we will be also looking at not only breast and cervical cancer, but we will also look at our pregnancies, where of lately, when I checked with other ladies from different mines, most of our expecting mothers tend to lose the babies. And when we checked with the local clinics, it's not something that is happening on the mines only, but also in the local clinics, they tend to experience that. So we want to also give an awareness about that and then talk about it, and yeah, and also with hypertension as well, and so that we will be talking about it. And we plan because when we have our annual Gauteng Women in Mining workshop, we wait for the Women in Mining Indaba. Then after that, then we have our workshop. So we intend to have our annual workshop in November, when we celebrate the beginning of 16 days of activism, but also on that we'll be talking about HIV, AIDS and awareness. And that one is purely because we see how issues of HIV and AIDS, we might say that it's not in the past, it's still in the present, and it's still affecting most of our people. And when you look also about on the same issue, the continuous encouragement for our employees to take the medication, but also do the test. And every time when we have those tests, and then we get new cases. So we need to continuously encourage our employees, and yeah. And also on this one, under occupational health, safety and security of women, that is where we talk about the information or the knowledge that we got from WIMAC, everything that all the studies that have been done. Then we invite one person from there to come and give us a talk about that. So our Women in Mining workshop, the annual one, so that is what it's about. Then on the next slide is just because the big event that we normally have is that one for the workshop. So for 2022, the last one that we had was 2019, where we hosted about 300 women, and there was complaints from around that is not enough. The previous one that we had in 2018, we hosted about 500. So on this one, we will be sending out letters of request to all the companies to request for funding. Based on the funding that we will get, then we will determine the number of people that we will be able to host. So we are requesting sponsors. You can see there we're wearing the pink shirts that were donated by one of the mines. And on this one, we had bottles that were from Afrimed, and yeah, so we will be coming back for 2022 with a humble request. And on the next slide, which is the last one, is because of the challenges that we tend to face when we meet each other as women, and to encourage and also have a development program whereby we will be the intention out of that is to encourage females on our Women in Mining committee to have a voice. The reason for that is that most of us, we are merely safety reps, or we are winch drivers from the big mines, and we are general workers. So some of these things we don't even know how to tackle that. How do I go if I want to go talk to my boss about what has been discussed in the structure? How do I go to him? Where do I start? How do I approach? And so to encourage and then make the ladies have a voice. So on that one, we had a discussion with Vets Business School, where they have agreed to tailor-make a course on gender identity in leadership program that will only be able to accommodate all of us. If we have someone who's sitting in as a manager on our structure, if we have someone who's a general worker on our structure, so that when we together as a team, then so the course will be tailor-made on that. So we will be in talk with DMRE, Mamukwena, and the MQA to get the speed process and assistance on that. So that is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Nariadi. And as you can see, Gauteng's challenges might not be the same as the rest, but you might be able to tap into that MQA tailor-made training course on how to be a bit assertive. So well done on the Gauteng Women in Mining, and that gives you some ideas of what programs you can look at. Although there's just 7 items under Gauteng that we're working on, but imagine if every region works on 7 items. The chain reaction to that can only be a positive intervention. Our next speaker, Mama Kwena, thank you so much from the DMRE for dialing in just to show small-scale mining. The DMRE is also involved in this on this platform directly with WIMAC. So just want to see Mama Kwena. Over to you, and if you can introduce yourself and just show yourself if possible. Mama Kwena, can you hear us? You're just still on mute. There we go. You must just unmute.
Morning, Letitia, and all the members of Aspasa.
Morning, Ma.
Can you see my face now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you for the invite. First of all, my name is Mamokwena or Nonoti. I am from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and I'm responsible for gender mainstreaming in the department as well as in our sector. DMRE has established a directorate called the Gender Mainstreaming and Transformation Directorate. This directorate has about 6 years been established, and its mandate is to ensure that gender is mainstreamed in all our institutions. So we are working together with all the relevant stakeholders to make sure that gender issues are actually addressed in the sector. And my focus today on my presentation, let me upload my presentation now.
Letitia, we've lost sound.
I see Mama Kwena is just muted. Mama Kwena, the presentation is showing. If they can just put it in presentation mode.
Okay.
And unmute. Yeah, there we go.
Shift here. Do you shift this one? Okay, let's do this. Can you see it now?
It is showing, but not in presentation mode. If you can just click on the icon on the bottom next to the minus.
Okay, I'm working on
Yes.
it.
There we go. It's there.
Okay, thank you. Slow, no? Okay, as I've already indicated, this is a new directorate, and our mandate is to ensure that we mainstream gender in all our institutions. And my focus will just give a bit of purpose of this presentation, as well as the background information, just a little bit, and the legislative mandates that authorizes us or all of us to be able to implement gender equality programs. And going back to this thing, it's giving me a problem. It doesn't want to, it doesn't move.
And if you have a mouse with a little wheel in the center, I find it works well if you move that thing.
What's wrong now?
I know Microsoft Teams is not so easy to share. It takes a while to get used to it. there, it's moving now. Mama Kwena, do you want to mail it to me? Or if it works better in this format, Mama Kwena, let's try in this format. It is readable. Mama Kwena, you're just on mute still. Do you want to try in this format or do you want to email it?
Let's try it in this format, please.
100%.
Can you see it though?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, my presentation will focus on the purpose and a little bit of some background legislative mandates, these national strategic frameworks that have been approved, and to conclude our presentation. The main purpose of this workshop, Letitia, I would like also to again thank you for inviting us, because we really would like to introduce and sensitize our industry, especially Aspasa, on these two national on GRP as well as GBV. We also would like to source and obtain support as well as collaborate with the industry in making sure that we implement the two frameworks so that we mainstream gender in our organization. There's also a call for us to address the scourge of gender-based violence and to ensure that the industry through government comply with the implementation of this framework, and to make sure that they monitor and evaluate progress made so that we ultimately achieve this gender equality that we always talk about in our industry. And a little bit of background is that all national departments, including our department, the minerals and the mineral resources and energy, we are required by the Office of the President through the Women's Ministry. We know that the Women's Ministry reports directly to the President in terms of issues of women empowerment, disability, as well as youth. So we are required to make sure that we workshop and sensitize, familiarize all the people of South Africa about these national frameworks on gender, to champion and to lead implementation of these frameworks. The GRP stands for Gender Responsive Planning, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing. It's quite a long abbreviation, but to keep it short, we normally call it the GRP. And this GRP framework was approved in 2019, and we have to lead the implementation in our organization. We are also required to make sure that we lead implementation of the GBV National Strategic Plan. So it's not only the DMRE that is required to be implementing this framework, all national departments, be it your tourism, be it your transport, be it your human settlement, your agriculture, all national departments have to work together with their sectors so that we make sure that there is this gender equality is realized. And mainly because there was an audit that was conducted and whose findings indicated that there is still no knowledge before we can even talk about accountability or ownership. There's still lack of knowledge in terms of all the legislation and national frameworks that have been put in place to make sure that gender equality is realized. So we are required to run as much workshops as we can so that everybody is aware that as South Africa, there are these legislative mandate and national policy frameworks that require us in our various institutions to make known about all these frameworks and prescripts. Once that is known, we have to make sure that there is accountability and ownership. In other words, the issues of women empowerment and equality, issues of gender-based violence should not only rest on the shoulders of women. We are required by this legislative mandate that there has to be ownership starting from the highest office, be it your minister, be it your DG, be it your HOD, be it your SOE. Everybody has to make sure that the gender mainstreaming is owned and managers get to be accounted for non-implementation or implementation thereof. There was also an issue during this audit that it's indicated that although different institutions do have a gender mainstreaming strategy, these strategies are not budgeted for. So there's a need to make sure that whatever programs and plans that are being put in place, we have to make sure that during our budget vote period, our medium-term budget period, gender budget is also allocated for programs that are dealing with gender mainstreaming. And basically because majority of women are still excluded from the mainstream economy. And this because most of the people are unemployed, are unequal, and are poor, it has been said to be the main driver of gender-based violence. So we are required to make sure that whatever programs that we come up with actually address all these gender disparities that we have highlighted right now, according to the gender audits. The objectives of the national frameworks on GRP and GBV is to make sure that there is a sustainable, which means long-term programs, not a once-off program, and then we forget about women empowerment and gender issues. It is also required that we must have comprehensive programs which are multi-sectoral so that whoever has to play a role, be it the Department of Health and health in terms of dealing with health and safety issues, be it the Department of Police when dealing with gender-based violence issues, be it the Department of Economic Development when dealing with economic issues, so that we address all the main causes of gender inequality, unemployment, and poverty. So it has to be multi-sectoral, meaning all parties have to be involved, be it the state, be it private companies, be it NGOs and civic association. We have to make sure that they actually are part of this program. We are also required to make sure that we come up with programs that are dealing with gender-based violence. And this strategic framework has been meant to intensify the fight against the abuse of women and children within our various sectors and operations. So those are the main aims of these national frameworks, the two of them. These national frameworks have been informed by legislative mandates internationally, regionally, within the country, which is national, and our sectoral prescripts. Internationally, we've got the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and against women, the 1979 prescript. We also have the Beijing Declaration for Platform of Action Against Abuse and Poverty for Women. We also have the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030. And you know that as South Africa, we are members of the United Nations. So we are signatories in all these international instruments. That is why these frameworks were sourced from these international instruments. The regional instruments that we have is the Solemn Declaration and the AU Agenda 2063, as well as the SADC Gender Protocol. Nationally, we've got our constitution, we've got our NDP, we've got the National Policy Framework on Women Empowerment and Gender Equality, which is the WEDGE. And lately we had now the GRP, which is more aligned to the MPRDA, as well as the NSG on GBV, that is more aligned to the Mine Health and Safety Act. And within our sector, we do have the MPRDA, the Mine Health and Safety Act, and the Mining Charter. So members are really encouraged to familiarize yourself, read these, so that when you make inputs and you make influences in your organizational strategic plans, as well as the policies and programs, then you know exactly what mandates you and where is that information coming from, so that it's not really the common sense that we are using, but to make sure that we really make sure that these legislative mandates are actually implemented. And when we come back to our sector, we do have the MPRDA, which we know that its main objective is to ensure that the sustainability and meaningful opportunities for historically disadvantaged, including women, so that we make sure that women also enter this mineral and petroleum industry and they benefit out of it. So basically this GRP, it's about economic empowerment of women. And when we talk economic empowerment, we talk about ownership. How many women mine owners are there? We talk about procurement. How many women-owned companies are being given, tender opportunities? How many women are in management position? And how many women are actually employed? So the GRP actually talks about economic employment, and that is where our focus when we develop programs has to be on. These are the 4 main areas which are led by the MPRDA over and above the national frameworks and the international instruments. So these national frameworks are actually vehicles that have been put in place by presidency to make sure that these legislative mandates are actually implemented. And this framework have got pillars that are actually making life easy for us, because they indicate the activities and the programs that we can put in place to make sure that there is ownership and accountability in terms of making sure that gender issues are addressed, in making sure that there are policies and making sure that there are programs. So they give you an exact, activities that have got to be done within each organization so that women empowerment and gender equality is realized. So starting with the first national framework, which is the GRPB, it has been approved in 2019. It has actually 8 to about 10 strategic pillars. I've just summarized them so that we focus on the main ones that our focus should be on. We also have the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. This one was just approved in 2020. It also has got 6 pillars which guides us, and you will find these under our the Department of Women's website or under the Gender Commission's website. That's where you will find these frameworks, so that when you read, then you can have a broader understanding of what is required of us. And therefore, when we start with the first pillar of the gender responsive planning, this gender responsive planning, as I have already indicated, it's merely about economic empowerment. Therefore, for us to economically empower women, there has to be the first pillar that is implemented within our organization. And that pillar talks to gender responsive governance and institutionalization of this pillar. In other words, it requires us that managers at the highest level become accountable in terms of implementing issues of gender-based violence. How is that being done? This framework has to be incorporated in our organizational strategic framework, in our managers' key performance plans, and we have to develop organizational strategies and implementation plans. And there has to be monitoring and evaluation and a report to indicate where is progress and where are the challenges. So it must first start by being incorporated. And I'm glad that we are working together with Mine Health and Safety Council to come up with the guidelines that are sector specific, so that once they get approved, we are now have the authority to ensure that it actually gets incorporated in our managers and our gender focal, including our gender committees that are being established, that their work plans and their performance agreement must integrate the issues of GRP, starting with pillar 1 of accountability and ownership. The same applies to the gender-based violence national strategic framework. That framework needs to form part of our managers' performance agreements, as well as our organizational strategic plans, and implementation programs must be there, monitored and evaluated. And this implementation plan must be in line with these national strategies. Colleagues, I have come to realize that most of the institutions do have gender equality strategies. But all these strategies are not aligned to the national framework. It is very critical, guys, that whatever strategy you come up with must be aligned to these framework, starting from pillar 1 of the GRP to the last pillar of the GRP, pillar 1 of the NSP on GBV to the last pillar, so that every program you align it to that. And that is very, very critical, because that is the only way that we can ensure that there's ownership, there's accountability, there's monitoring and evaluation, and progress can be determined. The second pillar requires that we must have organizational support and gender responsive policies, structures, and system. And I'm glad Mine Health and Safety Council has already established the WIMAC, which will be one of the structures that, and the regional, the WIM regional committees. Those structures need to be established, and we also have to have structures within our organizations, have gender committees or gender focal persons who will champion and drive gender mainstreaming within our organizations. So this pillar requires that there should be a budget that is being set up aside. Whatever program you put, allocate a budget on that program if there's a need for that budget. And ensure that all policies within your organization are developed if there are none, but they are reviewed if they exist. They are that already exist. They have to be reviewed so that they are aligned to all the legislations that we have talked about, our international instruments, our regional instruments, as well as our national instrument. Our policies must be in line with those legislative mandates. And we also have to make sure that systems, our reporting system, they've got columns that are dealing with gender, reporting. I know we are reporting on fatalities, we're reporting on health and safety issues, but there is never a report on issues of gender. So whatever systems that we've got there, we must ensure that it incorporates the gender column so that we know if there are fatalities taking place in the mines, how many women are affected. If there are injuries taking place, how many women are infected. If there are COVID-19, any diseases or HIV, we need to get data. So our systems must make sure that we report on gender issues. And then the structures, as we already indicated, we must have gender focal representatives, gender committees, your women's forum or your men's forums. That would also play a part in terms of making sure that gender is mainstreamed in our organization. And we have to make sure that we conduct gender audits. We've got a database which actually indicates the total number of women within our organization, within the region, and within the sector at large, so that we know how many women are employed, how many women are in management, how many women owned companies are procured, how many women are owning mines within the region, how many women are attending your GCC certificate management programs, as Naredi has indicated. All the programs must have a database so that we are able to check the disparities, and where there is a shortage, we are then informed by this shortage to say we still have a shortage of women in board level, for an example. We still have a shortage in GCC certificate, for an example. We need those statistics because through that gender audit, that's the only way we can come up with implementation plans that are targeting the root cause of gender inequality within our organization. Pillar number 2 on the GBV requires us to come up with prevention programs and to rebuild social cohesion within our organization. We have to come up with programs that are dealing with change of harmful cultural norms and behaviors, and I'm glad I've heard that Gauteng will be doing some program for boys. There's quite a challenge with our boy child, and if we do have programs of changing some of the behaviors there, that would also assist in terms of dealing with issues, core issues of inequalities and abuse of women. Workshop for managers have got to be conducted. If it means we have to conduct workshop for traditional leaders within the operations that we are working, or church leaders, or whatever organization, we have to work together multisectorally with our organizations, be it your labor relation office, if there are any issues of sexual harassment issues and things like that. So we have to work with everybody that is affected and involved as a relevant stakeholder. We have also to establish forums in this GBV, but as already indicated, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Forums that are there already must just be workshopped and be made, sensitized about these pillars, and make sure that their work plans and their constitution, are aligned to these pillars. Then we come to pillar number 3 of the GRP, which talks about capacity building and advocacy. We have to conduct as much awareness, but I'm afraid, colleagues, most of our programs are dealing much with awareness programs. Although it might not be all that are aware about the prescripts that are there and the pillars and activities, we have to come up with programs over and above awareness. We have to come up with, tangible programs that are making a difference in there. We can run workshops during our national events month, like our Women's Month and our 16 days campaign. We can run workshop, but lip service colleagues, we were told must end now. There has to be action. People are aware that there's abuse. People are aware that there's inequality, poverty, and unemployment. What are we doing about those ills? We have to introduce gender-targeted skills program. For an example, if you've got shortage of managers in the mine sector within your region, come up with that program as an example that Naredi has indicated that they've got a program with vets that would make sure that gender committee members have got a voice. We must also come up with a program that is giving gender management skills, management and leadership skills, so that when, vacancies for management in the mines are advertised, then we are sure we've got a pool of women. We know as women, always when a woman is to be appointed to a particular higher position, then questions are raised as to whether are they ready. If we take the example of the Chief Justice interviews to say, is Justice Maya ready for this post? We don't want to be having such questions when women are to be promoted to management position. We therefore must make sure that programs to skill and make them ready and competent for those positions are actually put in place. Whether it poverty alleviation programs, economic empowering programs, there has to be programs that make sure that women also are advanced to positions of decision making, to ownership positions, including those that are in business and procurements. They also have to be trained and ensure that enterprise development programs are there, in partnership with mining companies. Those are the things that are required. And in the GBV, pillar number 3, when we deal with abuse and sexual harassment, we have to make sure that we come up with programs that bring about justice, safety, and protection in our workplaces and in the public spaces wherein we are working. The communities in which we are working, it is our duty as the operation that we make sure that if there's abuse of women within, if there's the pregnancy of teenagers, like the example I normally give to say, there was a case when we were in one of our reporting meetings at the presidency, and some of the civic organization from the Rustenburg region came to give a report and complaint to say there is a high level of teenage pregnancies that is taking place around mining areas in Rustenburg, and these young girls are actually impregnated by mine workers within the mines, and they see no action that has been taken by the mining companies to ensure that we address those kind of issues. And those are the practical issues that we have to address, colleagues, when we come up with justice, safety, and protection, so that workplaces are safe, public services are safe for the women and the children around the areas in which we are working. And we have to encourage reporting of cases of sexual harassment. They have to be reported. If it means working with labor relation to identify the kind of grievances that have been put in place and to come up with, programs to address that in partnership with labor relations, so be it. Perpetrators have to be dealt with through the hearing, and if it means dismissal, so be it, or conviction. We therefore have to work with SAPS if we find such a cases being reported, be it rape, be it sexual harassment, be it bullying, and please differentiate between management of work and abuse. There is a difference. So when you look into these cases with your labor relation office and the police, you must be able to have those discretionaries and make sure that justice is served for the victims of gender-based violence. We also have to have responses, care, and support programs for the victims. And how do we do that? We must make sure that there are policies, not those policies that are just plucked on the wall to say there's a sexual harassment policies and everybody comes in, there is that policy on our walls, but there's 21% of women being sexually harassed and there's nothing that is really being done about it within the very same organization. So policies must really deal with issues that are being reported on sexual harassment, your rapes, and your femicide. We know this country is actually, it has been declared a second pandemic when it comes to abuse of women. So budget has also to be allocated if these people need psychological help through our wellness centers, if these people need legal help through representation in court, budget must be set aside for such support and for such healing. And we should work together with the homes, the NGOs, the shelters that are there, so that within our area of operation, we know that when we have issues of gender-based violence, we know where we can refer them. We know the kind of programs that we have partnered with those NGOs, and destigmatize issues of sexual harassment and rape. People are even scared to report such cases, and we know a lot of these cases are not reported because, first of all, there are no safety measures or support systems that have been put in place. There are no networks that are there to support such victims. So we are dealing with people that are dying inside emotionally and physically, and yet they are expected to perform. So we need those kind of programs. But most importantly, as we have already indicated, that unemployment, poverty, and inequality, and including abuse of women, are led and driven by, economic issues. So there has to be a comprehensive programs that are put in place. And pillar number 4 of the GRP requires that there should be economic programs and growth development programs that are meant to empower women or any other target for that matter. But as we know that statistics as they stand, women are still at a lower level. So the majority of programs should be focusing more on women. And then, yes, we do allow those that are focusing on men, but when we, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So this pillar requires that we have to establish public-private partnership on major economic empowerment programs that are targeting women or men. So that we've got, during our Women's Month, we are establishing a program to say so many women are being trained on a small entrepreneur or business development programs, so that they are on the enterprise development programs. Those are the kind of programs we want to see during the Women's Month. And we also have to form partnership under the GBV program, also form public-private partnership with our procurement offices. The policies on procurement within our supply chain offices, we have to work together with those offices so that we know that whatever procurement budget has been set aside, we must be able to determine how much has been set aside for women, so that we can come up with programs which are called survivor-focused programs that are dealing with women that have survived rapes, that have survived sexual harassment, and have resigned from work, or those women that have been, retrenched due to COVID-19 illnesses. We make sure that we come up with those kind of programs so that these women are able to generate income. Colleagues, this is about poverty. It is about inequality. It is about unemployment. So I would urge that most of the program be aligned to ownership, procurement, management, and employment equity. So that during the Women's Month, as the last pillar, we monitor and evaluate programs in those areas, and we celebrate achievement of women that shall have obtained their GCC for certificate, for example, or women that have been promoted to senior management position, for an example, or women that have established a company through the what training program that has been established. Those are the kind of programs that we need, colleagues. We don't need programs like your fun walks. You know, we normally do our fun walks, we normally do our food parcels, we normally do our sanitary pads, our paintings. Those things are for the departments of social development to do. We are an economic cluster department, and the presidency wants us, just like the DTI, just like tourism, just like human settlement, they want us to come up with economic empowering programs that are generating income for both the victims or for the unequal and the unemployed. Those are the programs we need. And during the 16 days campaign, we need to know the cases of sexual harassment that have been reported, what programs have been put in place for those victims, and what progress has been made. If it's a new project, let us establish during the 16 days campaign to say these are a group of women that were identified within this region for abuse because of unemployment and poverty, and therefore this is the program that we have put in place. So these pillars, colleagues, are very critical for all of us to make sure that when we come up with our gender programs and plans are in line with these programs. The 16 days is another one, and during the 2021 16 days campaign, the campaign was focusing on pillar 1, which is accountability, and pillar 5, which is economic empowerment. So the focus is still there, colleagues, that we still need to economically empower the women, and we still need to make sure that our managers are responsible, so that we monitor progress of programs that are there, and we celebrate achievements that are there. And that is where I conclude, so that together as we collaborate, we can be able to end the scourge of gender-based violence in our communities and our workplaces, alleviate poverty and economic dependency, create jobs, and improve the lives of our people out there, particularly the women. Thank you very much, Program Director. That is where I end.
Thank you, Mama Kwena. Any questions? Just while you are thinking, I've picked up a few things, and a multi-sectoral approach is very important. And as you know, most of small-scale mining falls within the construction materials industry. So you can collaborate, and that's another one, collaborating with the DMRE, this program of Mama Kwena's, the Mine Health and Safety Council, the Aspasa Gender Justice. We cannot do it alone. And one thing in small-scale mining that we are not very good at is keeping record of these victories that we do have within development of women in the workplace. I think in the next one, we should have a few youngsters come and tell their story of how they developed within small-scale mining. I can think about 5 already just on top of my head. And HR collaboration. There are sensitive things that we are dealing with, which includes harassment and bullying, and you do need HR in these processes. And then your mining charter and social labor plans, and those victories that I'm talking about that we must share more widely. Is there any other questions before we close out the meeting? Or any recommendations of what we should do at our next gender justice session for Aspasa? Anyone is welcome to make inputs. Thank you very much, Nico and Anneke, for Aspasa, for this platform. I think today again was so valuable. And Mama Kwena, Tabu and Nariari had to go to an EXCO meeting, but thank you very much for your time to address this platform. And I hope it helped you to structure in your mind, how are you going to make a difference at your operations. I'll hand back to Anneke and Nico. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Letitia, and thank you for all our presenters. That was very insightful. And we look forward to our next Women in Mining Gender Justice, which will be in August to coincide with Women's Day. Go well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. And thanks for the participants. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.